Welcome to the AmericanaMusic.com podcast with your host, Sarah Popejoy.
Today on AmericanaMusic.com, we are excited to have Grammy-nominated Tony Kamel, frontman and songwriter for the band Wood and Wire. He's releasing his solo album, We're All Gonna Live, April 18th. An amazing singer-songwriter who plays a claw hammer banjo, harmonica, and acoustic guitar on the album. His approach of mixing songwriting philosophy stem right out of the Woody Guthrie playbook. We're excited to have Tony Kamel. Welcome, Tony.
I'm excited to be here, Sarah. Thank you for having me.
Tony, you're based in Austin now. Can you talk a little bit about where you're from originally, where you grew up?
I was born and raised in Houston, Texas, fourth largest city in America. Not exactly a hotbed for bluegrass necessarily, although this isn't a bluegrass record. It's sort of what I'm known for. But yeah, I was born and raised in Houston, and I went to school in Austin at the University of Texas and stuck around.
So who were some of your early influences, music-wise?
I mean, my early influences were centered around a lot of psychedelic rock, like Ozzy Osbourne and Frank Zappa, and I just liked weird stuff. You know, my mom and dad had a collection of records and CDs and stuff over the years, and I got into roots music in high school, late 90s, early 2000s. There was this sort of Texas country thing going on that got me interested in songwriting, and I always tend to work backwards. It was kind of through that I looked to classic forefathers of country music like Willie Nelson. In the late 90s, early 2000s, jam bands were a big thing in my world as well. Bring Cheese Incident, Fish, and then worked backwards to the Grateful Dead. They all teased bluegrass songs and in their music. And so it wasn't until college I started getting interested in listening to that style. It wasn't even until after college that I started getting interested in learning how to do that. That's when I discovered Doc Watson. And it was through the discovery of John Hartford where the songwriting worlds came together, where people like Townes Van Zandt and Willie and those old school sort of Texas songwriters melded in my mind with a guy like John Hartford, who's definitely one of my biggest heroes as far as a performing and songwriting. And it also melded with this psychedelic world in a way that hit me because he kind of did whatever he wanted. That was sort of the essence of, I think, psychedelic music is just experimenting and doing stuff that feels right, although it may not be what's considered popular at the time. I don't really know how to explain it other than I'm inspired by other musicians who just kind of do whatever they want and don't worry too much about what's going on outside of that.
When listening to your music, I can definitely hear the elements of folk country songwriter telling the story mixed with the bluegrass element, which is really, really a cool melding.
Thank you. I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah. Eventually life starts to knock you around. You've got to be ready to fight with a smile. Your grandmother Dolores gave you this piece of advice, and it's the thesis for the album. Can you talk a little bit about your grandmother and how she has influenced the album?
Sure. We were really close, and she passed away a handful of years ago. I'd call her often. We'd talk often. We'd have good philosophical discussions. We honestly didn't talk a lot about family. We just kind of talked about life. I always tried to make it a point to go see her when I go to Houston. She was the matriarch on my dad's side. It was my dad's mom. We, as a family, experienced a lot of tragedy in sort of a short period of time. Her husband, my grandfather, passed away, and then 6 months later, my dad had a stroke, and he was in pretty bad shape for a year and a half before he passed away. And during that time, she was sort of a pillar of strength. And then early on in his recovery, something else happened that ended up being a huge blessing. Basically, one of my siblings unexpectedly having a baby on the heels of like my dad being sick and just all these awful things. That's when she told me that quote. She was referring to that, because she was just the whole situation in general. And I kind of remembered when she said that when my dad got sick, right after he had the stroke, we were there and in the hospital. He was obviously in bad shape. And I remember there was a time where I was sort of breaking down and she had her hand on my shoulder and she just had a little smile on her face. And by the way, that's not to say that she didn't break down over this stuff too, but when there was a time for her to be there for one of us, she was sort of a pillar of strength. And then when he passed away, I remember a similar moment where I looked at her and she had a little smile on her face. And, I just kind of never forgot that quote. I think it's not atypical of a folk or roots songwriter or any songwriter to write about difficult things that happen in life. So there's nothing new there necessarily, but for me, they were just these typical difficult parts of life. It doesn't mean every song's a downer. I try to spin them in a positive way because it's inevitable and it's just part of it. And so that's what the smile is for. Like, yeah, you're going to get beat up and you just got to kind of fight with a smile on your face.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as deep between the imagery on the front of the record and really, really artistic, but I'm not. I think it's all typical stuff. It's personal. And so that's kind of why that kind of sums up the thesis, you could say.
You know, it doesn't have to have a ton of intricacies to be deeply meaningful at the time. The most profound things are usually very to the point.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And I don't write a ton of songs. I'm not super prolific writer necessarily. I don't co-write with people hardly at all. When I write something, usually personal, it has to really strike me. I can't just write about anything. So these kind of came together and I started to feel a theme happening and I tried my best to tie it up in a little bow.
Yeah. You were talking about the cover of your album. You're holding a banjo and you've got a black eye and a bloody lip.
Yeah. And a stupid grin on my face.
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted to express myself artistically on the image of the record too. I wanted to make that an interesting thing, at least to me.
Yeah.
And then, there's part of me in the back of my mind as a music business person too. I wanted to make something memorable that people would kind of wonder what was going on and make a statement, if you will.
Yeah.
Get people talking about it, but also have fun with it artistically. And I really enjoyed doing that photo shoot. I enjoyed the concept. I tooled around with a few different cover ideas. And this one started off as sort of that's a little too much. And then once we started messing with it, I was like, well, screw it. I mean, nothing really matters anymore. I mean, I don't think that I'm trying to adhere to anything. So I was like, I might as well try this out. And I just sort of went with what felt like it would be the most fun and the most interesting. And I'm pretty happy with it, honestly.
Yeah, it's very cool. And you definitely remember it. There's so many different covers. It's definitely something different and unique.
Some people are like, what the hell is going on here? I'm not known for doing weird self-expression like that. But it's because I've been a coward about it in the past. And I didn't want to this time. I wanted to just sort of throw it out there and see how it felt. And it felt pretty good.
Yeah, cool. You've talked about how stoicism has influenced not only your everyday life, but how you approach songwriting. It's been a while since I took humanities in college. Can you explain a little bit about the idea of stoicism and how it has influenced your writing?
Sure. And it did, in the sense, I'm not like some deeply educated stoic. During that difficult period in our life, I found some books on stoicism and I read them. There's a quote from Marcus Aurelius, who's one of the fathers of stoicism, for lack of a better term. I want to make sure I get it right. So I'm going to grab it from this document because I want to make sure I get it right. There's a quote from Marcus Aurelius, and it's from his book Meditations, which is just essentially his diary over the years.
Right.
And the quote is, "Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." And that quote just struck me. I would go back to that quote here and there, but that's kind of where the concept of the song, or at least the slogan, "We're all going to live," came from.
Yeah.
And we had toyed around with the ideas of calling a record "We're All Going to Die" and Wood and Wire as a concept long ago. And then I noticed in my writing these songs that I was saying that a lot. I was going to say, "We're all going to die," or "You're going to die and I'm going to die," just in several of the songs throughout the record. It kind of hit me. I remember that quote as I was rereading some stuff about stoicism. And I was like, well, I need to find a way to incorporate "We're all going to live" into these songs somehow. And then I had a melody in my head and I attached it to that. And then I ended up writing that song based on a brief interaction I had with an unhoused person in Austin, and knew immediately as I was writing it that I was going to put it at the end of the record. I was thinking about how to sequence the record and how it was all going to come together the whole time.
Yeah.
Without getting too deep into stoicism, because it's not, I don't want to make it seem like I'm a deeply educated philosopher, but that specific quote sort of coined the name of the record. And there are other basic stoic concepts that I learned over the years that just helped me ease my grief, I guess you could say, during that time. And they're nothing too exciting that we need to talk about here. They're pretty basic stuff, really. It's just, there's something in front of you that's slowing you down. The way is through it and not around it. You can't get around it. Things like that. It's just what will be, will be. There's not a whole lot you can do about it other than doing stuff about it directly. Because I have such a hard time articulating some of these concepts. It's really just little tidbits that I picked up along the way that really just helped me stay focused on what's in front of me, I guess.
So what I picked up from my short diving into it before this interview, it's kind of like the Serenity Prayer on steroids. You can control what you can control, and what you can't control, don't focus and worry about.
Absolutely.
Was my understanding of it.
Yeah, and the Serenity Prayer is mentioned in modern day Stoicism, books on Stoicism.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's a good point. But specifically, that quote is where I got the idea for "We're all going to live."
That's great. That's great.
It was more of a timepiece thing. Like I was reading a lot about it in that particular period of time.
Learning that part about you, I was imagining with the song "Making It Work," super deep meaning. And then I saw your Instagram post. You know, if you're not too embarrassed to tell that story, it's just part of life's moments.
I should have clarified that it wasn't that specific incident that made me go, oh, I'm going to write this song. It was one of many, you know, it's just.
Oh, yeah.
It's specifically being a parent, me being the musician parent who kind of mostly does his stuff at night. During the day, my daughter's 4, but over the last 4 years, I've done a lot of the daytime parenting stuff. And I do have to get stuff done as a musician on the computer, answering emails, talking to the people I work with. And I don't remember exactly what I had to do, but the story goes like this. We were at a restaurant and the restaurant had a playscape, which is sort of a parenting hack, very obvious one, where she can go play with other kids and I can kind of look up from my computer every few minutes, make sure she's alive. You know, it's not the greatest thing to do, but we all have to do it. There's not a parent on earth that hasn't had to look at their phone, answer an email, answer a text. And I mentioned in that post, like, there's plenty of influencer parents who are making these videos or writing these blogs about the importance of being present as a parent. And obviously, I agree with that. But what happened in that instance is I looked up and my daughter had dropped her pants and started peeing down the slide on the playscape.
Oh.
I was so flabbergasted in that moment that I panicked completely, shut my laptop, threw it in my backpack, and I grabbed her and we just left, which when I should have done was apologize to everyone who was staring at me, clean up the slide, let the manager know in case they wanted to shut down. I don't know, put some bleach on. I have no idea what they would have done, but I should definitely have let someone know. But I left in a panic, and that was the wrong thing to do. I think if you have kids or even if you don't, if you have any career at all and you're going through, you're just living day to day, a lot of things feel like they're never going to get done, never going to come together, never going to work out, but somehow, some way or another it does. And sometimes there's no real rhyme or reason as to why, but you just keep going and making things work, and it works out. And part of the song, there's a line that's sort of a love song line where I've got the ways if you've got the means. And that's sort of I'm doing this with another person, my partner, my wife, Paige. We do it together and we take on different types of loads sometimes. But without her, I don't even know if it would even be remotely possible. People seem to like that post, so I guess I should do more of those. The other thing, I'm sorry, I'm blathering now, but
No.
One thing I was a little worried about with the cover of the record is, well, I hope people see a little bit of humor in it too. I think humor is an important part of grief, getting through difficult times. And that's another reason for the little smirk on my face. It's a little bit of a dark, humorous look, but that song is supposed to be you're supposed to feel out of control, and almost in a way where it's almost funny. It's like, you know what? I don't even know if I can try to control any of this anymore. So I'm just going to see what happens, kind of a thing. So
yeah, that's cool. That's cool. No, seriously. I mean, we're all just trying to get through it, right?
Definitely.
So best we can. Hindsight's always 2020.
Yeah, for sure. There's no doubt.
Damn Good Ride. You wrote at your grandmother's house after she passed. Can you talk about that song and about writing it?
Sure. I wrote the chorus there, or part of it anyway, and a few lines. In a moment, it's kind of like when I was saying earlier, I don't write a ton of songs. I don't write every day, and like a lot of people I know. And I'm not saying that's the wrong way to do it either, or this is the right way. But my grandmother passed, and we were lucky to have her. She was 85. I felt really lucky to have her that whole time. So obviously I was sad, but when you get a full life with somebody, especially after losing my father so young, I had a really deep sense of appreciation for what I had with her and how fortunate I was to have her for so long and to be so close with her. They lived in that that house a long time. We had a lot of memories there. It was packed up. There were boxes. We were getting stuff ready to sell. We were deciding what to keep. I almost forgot about this as I was writing stuff to make the bio, but I found a box of love letters between she and my granddad. My granddad was in the military and she was home, and there must be a few hundred of them. It was pretty incredible to see them. And I opened one and read part of it, and then I closed it because I realized I wouldn't want someone going through my phone and looking at the text messages I send between me and my wife when I'm dead, honestly. So I didn't look at any more of the letters, and I just have them in a box for safekeeping. I had my banjo with me, and I just kind of was sitting there taking it all in, and a little melody popped in my head, and I thought of a few lines and wrote them down, messed around with it for a little while, had a couple of good things I thought were good about it. Then I kind of felt that feeling fade away a little bit, and then I went back to packing up stuff. But I spent a good 30 minutes or an hour just doing what I think a lot of people have done in life, which when they go through that exact thing, which it's common, when someone in your family dies and they're the last person to live in that house, you have to do something with all the stuff and do something with the place itself. And it represents the end of something, something important and profound. These houses are, as I am growing a family, I start to understand how much they mean, So basking in it and feeling the sadness and the happiness and all the things that you feel when you do that. I just really wanted to feel it as much as I could. She gave me a couple of lines and a melody. And then later on, I went and finished the song in downtown Galveston when I was there for a show. And I like that song a lot. And I'm proud to give it to her and my family as a gift.
Yeah, those they're special when they have a lot of history and meaning to not just you, but your family as well.
For sure.
It's like something you can pass on. Your song, Sue, which is really, that was the first single, right? Is it the first single or?
I don't even remember now, Sarah, honestly.
It's okay.
We started with Damn Good Ride, and then we did Sue, I think.
Oh, okay.
You could easily be right.
Oh, that's okay. But talk a little bit about that song and your friend Sue.
Yeah, I mentioned at the end of talking about that one how Damn Good Ride's a gift for my grandmother and our family. I like to think of songs as gifts. It gives it a good perspective and it makes it easier to write, I think. Sue was an awesome lady. She was the mother of one of my best friends. And Sue and her husband Ken lived in Monroe, Louisiana. When we'd travel east, we'd always stop there and stay with them. And we wouldn't get in until 2 or 3 in the morning. And she'd wake up and put on a pot of gumbo and start feeding us. And Ken would get up and he'd break out his banjo because he's a really excellent banjo player. And he'd want to pick songs with our banjo player, Trevor, in Wood and Wire. And we just got really close with her and Ken over the years. And they just had this really cool Louisiana hospitality thing going that's kind of hard to explain unless you experience it. If you go there and experience it, it's a beautiful thing and it's part of the culture in that state. But they both became good friends of ours and mine. And their son, Griffin, is still one of my close friends. And when I go see him, it's like I'm hanging out with us. He's just like his parents. And it's a beautiful thing. So when Sue passed away, can't remember how it came about, but she was on my mind and something just popped in. And I tried to ride that wave. And really, the second verse of that song is even more of a thesis for the whole record, I think. Where it says, if you're living and breathing and you're doing that right, then you ought to be loving with all of your might. The loving is easy, but it don't come for free. Yeah, if you're going to love, boys, you better believe that loving and grieving, they go hand in hand. That's the thing about living. That's the deal. That's the plan. Eat up, toke up, and drink up that wine because we're all going to die, boys. We're all going to die. Not even a year after Sue passed away. She had cancer. She fought it. It went away. It came back. She did the whole thing with grace. And then not even a year. And I had already written the song. After Sue passed away, Ken passed away. And it was awful because it was more sudden. I really think about their family often because that was another tragedy. But I wanted that song to be a gift and a celebration of a life well lived and people that I love very much. As hard as that was to lose her, I wanted to celebrate and it be a positive thing.
Yeah, it's so easy to get consumed by the sadness of it, but to be able to really celebrate with the impact that they've had on you, people we've lost, something inspiring. When you recorded We're All Gonna Live, which is coming out April 18th, it was recorded live to tape, and you also produced the album. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I co-produced it with Bruce Robinson, one of the great Texas songwriters. He's written Traveling Soldier by the Chicks. He wrote wrote Wrapped by George Strait. He wrote Angry All the Time by Faith Hill and Tim McGraw. And he's a good friend and he's a great guy. And he has a studio in Lockhart that's all analog. There's no computers. You can separate out and do things individually, and I did this on my first record. He co-produced that with me as well. But we just stood in a circle and played the songs. Every take you hear is a live take. There's videos of almost all the recordings and on YouTube as they're coming out. And those videos are us recording the takes. They're not lip synced. They're just us doing the take. The thing I like the most about that is there's an energy. I mean, I'm singing out of tune in some places. There's little bitty mistakes that maybe bothered me a little that now I love. And I think the imperfections are in there, but you almost don't notice them in a certain way. And that gives it a thing. I hope anyway. The sound feels big and rich and live because it is. And there's bleed in all the mics and nothing's completely isolated. And I love that. And then when you're in there listening, you have to use your ears because there's no computer screens. And I don't mind working in a studio with computers. Don't get me wrong. I love it. But there's something different about not looking at the screen where you see the waveforms and you see where things maybe got cut or moved. If you just close your eyes and listen, you have to only use your ears. It makes for a different recording experience. And that's the second time we did it. I owe Bruce Robinson so much to this phase of my career. And I could never thank him properly. I love that man. He's a brilliant guy and a good friend. I'm so glad that he wanted to work together.
No, it sounds great. There's mistakes I don't hear.
Okay, good. I do, but I kind of don't mind them,
Tony, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to interview with us. It was really great learning more about your music and your ideas behind the music as well. This exciting project you have coming out in April. I really can't wait for it to come out. I know everybody's going to love it. So I just want to thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Sarah. You're a joy, and I look forward to listening to more episodes of the podcast.
Oh, thanks, Tony. Here's a short clip with next week's interview with Leslie Jordan. As we said in the introduction, that this album is about your grandfather, Bobby. Can you set up the story about your grandfather and how you came across his writings, which this album is based around?
About 30 years ago, my grandfather passed away, and his sister went to clean out his house in Cerrito, California, called my mom and said, "I'm at your dad's house. Is there anything you want of his?" Rewind the story. My mom never really knew her dad. He left when she was 4. She had some interactions with him kind of throughout her life, but they were mostly negative interactions. She told her aunt, "There's really nothing of his that I'm interested in." I do recall he wrote a poem for me one time. "So can you just check to see if he has anything in writing?" And that was all she said. And about a month later, a cardboard box packed full of notebooks and journals showed up on her doorstep. So this would have been in 1995. She spent the next 20 years kind of combing through those and I think reconciling her story. There were moments where she would be reading his logged journals, the timeline, and she would be like, "Okay, this was the year I was here, and this is what I was doing in 1967, and this is what I was doing in 1973, and so on and so forth," and really getting to know him. She and I started talking more and more about it, I would say 2015, 2016. My mom is an amazing writer, poet. She saw the through line kind of right away. This was sort of imprinted on me, even though he was never around. And then actually through a book my mom gave me, sort of discovered this creative writing process. The more we got into that, the more we started talking about his story. And she photocopied all of his poetry for me and put it in a binder and sent it to me because I just said, "I'm so curious. I want to read some of his writing." The more time I spent in that writing, the more I got to know him and thought that it would be an incredible story to tell. And my medium is songwriting. I wanted to see if I could sort of reconcile his story a little bit and also trace that through line between him, to my mom, to myself in this really kind of gift that we were given.
Yeah. Poetry and writing, it can be so personal, and there was such a disconnect personally with him. So I can just imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And he journaled like prolific, like he was constantly writing. He was an alcoholic. And so you can tell sort of through a lot of his journals, the times when he would be, binging, or he would kind of drop out and then he would come back in. And as he would sober up, there would be this sort of creative mindset and then things would tether off. About a year ago, my mom and I went and spent 3 days. We met in Kentucky and just sat and read his journals together. And some of it's really sad and dark and confusing. confusing, and you can definitely tell the times when he was drinking a lot. But I think what we kind of concluded was, that creative thing that is in all of us, regardless of your circumstances and the choices that you make, that thing will come out of you no matter what. And I think for him, creating and writing poetry, short stories, his longing for that sort of transcended whatever he did to try and kill that part of himself off. He had a dream of being a beat poet and ended up out in Venice Beach, California. And he wrote a journal entry basically saying like he couldn't believe how insufferable most of them were. And I think there was sort of that self-reflection even in that moment. He was able to kind of look at himself and go, okay, this is who I am. And the things that you hate about other people sometimes are the things you hate about yourself too. And he was a really introspective person. I think he was just a poet and a writer without an audience. But I think he longed for that connection more than anything.
Thank you so much for listening to AmericanaMusic.com podcast. Be sure to go to AmericanaMusic.com and find playlists of the Americana artists we've interviewed here. Also, be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast platform.